Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk about word and image connotations. At this point in your content strategy, you've done some research on a target audience or a target buyer segment. You've created a persona for that segment. You've created a content strategy discussing how you're going to target that segment. And the next step is to think about the specific words and images that you can use to convey your message to your target audience or target buyer segment on your website or blog. So in your content strategy, you created an annotated strategy statement and you explained what you're setting out to do. You're setting out to, for example, create a community of TCOM students. Perhaps you are setting out to create the go-to information source for prospective college students. Whatever it is, that's going to sort of guide your strategy and explain what the website or blog or whatever digital artifact you're making is supposed to do. And the next step then is to figure out what kind of words and images can we put on that digital artifact in order to do that and to convey our messages. So first of all, let's talk about connotation. A connotation is an idea or feeling that a word invokes in addition to its literal or primary meaning. And you probably are pretty familiar with this word. We all know that words have connotations, I think. You know, you're a great student is different from you're a stellar student. The connotation of stellar is much more elite than just great. Great is a more commonly used word. It's a word that a lot of people use as kind of a throwaway word like or awesome. So stellar has a different connotation above and beyond the connotation of the word great. Some further examples would be he's nice versus he's charming, right? Because charming sort of has this connotation in which it indicates the person is trying really hard to think about your feelings or to be to show some element of caring and understanding toward you, whereas nice doesn't necessarily have a connotation of intent. She's fit versus she's ripped, right? Fit implies that this person is athletically or physically fit. Ripped implies that this person has lots of muscles, that this is like a gym rat type person. He's smart versus he's a genius. Again, genius has a connotation above and beyond smart. It has more of a one of a kind, one in a million type connotation. And then I live in a neighborhood versus I live in a community. The difference here is a neighborhood, the connotation for neighborhood is more of like a geographic sense, whereas community is more of a social sense. So if I say I live in a neighborhood, it probably conjures an image of a suburb of some type with houses. Whereas when I say I live in a community, it probably conjures an image of lots of different kinds of people doing things together. So we're all probably pretty familiar with connotation when it comes to words. But in this video, what I want to show is how visuals also have connotation. And by visuals, I mean graphics and designs. So magazine spreads, websites, photos, logos. In this class, you're going to develop a blog website. You're going to select and edit photos. You're going to create a logo for your blog. And so you'll be creating graphics and designs that need to have a visual connotation supporting your brand personality or your brand story or your brand message that you've created. So why is this important? Well, it's important because you're going to be making some visuals, but it's also important because when visitors get to a website, they spend just 6 to 8 seconds deciding whether they're going to stay or leave. And I think I talked in the first week a little bit about how people use the web and how it's different than mass media. On the web, people are browsing and searching. You wrote an essay question about this. On the web, they browse, they search, so they're constantly darting from site to site, searching for information. And when they find a website, they spend just 6 to 8 seconds looking at it and searching around on that site to decide whether they're going to stay or leave. So what they read and see in just 6 to 8 seconds has a huge impact on whether your content is read by that person. So what they read and see in 6 to 8 seconds really has to express your brand essence and the critical information you need that buyer segment to get. And the best way to present your brand essence, your brand story, your brand message, your brand personality in just 6 to 8 seconds is to load that page with some visuals that have connotations supporting your story, your message, your personality, and to load it with words that, again, have the connotation you want to support your story, message, or personality. So really quickly, before we get to talking about affectivity, which you will reader have read about this week, I want to talk about association and grouping. You probably remember from Journalism 103 learning Gestalt theory, in which you learned about how the mind groups things. In surfing the web, when people are searching and browsing, vision is their primary sense. And in everyday life, it's one of the primary senses. People rely on it for most occasions as the primary sense. And so we have to understand how people use their vision. And the Gestalt approach, or as you remember from J103, Gestalt theory, is a way of understanding and considering how people interpret what they see. So the Gestalt approach asks us to consider, how will people interpret what they're seeing? How will they interpret this logo I've made? How will they interpret this website I've designed? And people tend to see, one of the key takeaways of the Gestalt theory or the Gestalt approach is that people tend to see groups of things. You probably remember from J103 a visual grouping exercise like this one here with the birds. These birds are very similar, but your mind forms groups. You probably think that the pink birds are somehow related, whereas the out of focus fuzzy birds are probably related more to each other than they are to the pink, and the upside down birds are related more to each other than they are to the fuzzy birds or to the pink birds. And so when your eye looks at a design, anything that is similar is seen to be as a group. Whether it's similar in shape, similar in size, similar in texture, or in this case, fuzziness, in focus or out of focus, similar in color. But we also form conceptual groups based on visual groups. So in this awkward family photo on the right, visually, everyone pretty much looks the same except for the little rock and roll kid with the headband, the Guns N' Roses wannabe over on the right. So he visually sticks out because he's not the same. So when we see all the elements of this picture, our brain groups everyone on the left as being one thing, and the little boy with the long hair and the leather jacket and the acid wash jeans, we decide, he looks different, so in our brain he becomes different. So visual grouping helps us to think of conceptually related groups. So conceptually, we see the family on the left to be straight-laced, boring, suburban people, just vanilla people, nothing special. On the right, we have this kid who looks much different, and so conceptually, we imagine that he must be very different from the people in this picture. Now, his outward appearance doesn't necessarily tell us that. I mean, he could be just as square as these people, But conceptually, because our brain forms these groups, we conceptually think about those groups as being different things. And another key aspect of visual grouping is that we think of things as groups of things. Here we have 3 different representations of a tree. On the left, we have an image that's representational, which means it's true to life. It's a photo. It shows exactly what we're looking at, a real tree. In the center, we have an image of a tree that is symbolic. It's not a real tree. It's a drawing a symbol that stands in for a tree. On the right, we have a painting of a tree that is abstract. It's kind of, it's got tree-like qualities, but it's not meant to literally be a tree. It's sort of abstract. We're supposed to take some artistic message out of it. It's not just standing in for a tree. So in this slide, we have a representational tree, a symbolic tree, and an abstract tree. But regardless of the presentation of these trees, when your brain sees each of these, you see a darkly colored trunk and then a leafy poof at the top. And conceptually, you see all of these as trees. So visuals not only, our brain doesn't just group visuals, it groups them into categories or types of things. So we have a concept of a tree, and we can recognize that concept whether we're looking at a representational real tree or whether we're looking at an abstract artistic tree. We still recognize the concept of a tree. So having this understanding of the brain and how we form groups and create concepts from it can really help us understand how visual communication works. And that takes us to attractive things work better. This idea that understanding the brain helps us understand how people form ideas of visuals in their mind, how they conceptualize visuals, is really the underpinning of this work, which you are reading this week in this course. And Attractive Things Work Better is the first chapter of a book by Don Norman, a designer and design researcher. The book is called Emotional Design. And in this chapter, Norman lays out his theory of affectivity. And affectivity is a theory of visual processing proposed by Norman that is based on the understanding of the brain. So a good example of affectivity in action, and a study that Norman discusses early in his chapter, Attractive Things Work Better, is a study that was done in Israel that was actually a repeat of a study done elsewhere, in which an ATM was programmed. This ATM software was programmed onto two machines. On one machine, it was given poor visuals on the interface, which if you've used an ATM before, you know you have to sort of press the screen to get it to do things. On one machine, the screen design was really bad and didn't use any of the design principles that should be employed in design that you may remember from J103, like balance, harmony, contrast. On the other machine, design principles were used, and the visuals were meant to be pleasing to the eye and to be aesthetically pleasing. The ATMs worked the same, it was only the visuals that were different. And in that test, people who used people reported that the ATM that was more attractive in its visuals was easier to use. Now, there's no way it really was easier, there's no way that it worked the same. You had to press the same buttons to do the same things on both machines. So as far as using, actually using it, the number of buttons you had to press and in the order, that was the same. Because the visuals were attractive, people believed that the ATM with the attractive visuals was easier to use. So their perception of how easy this machine was to use changed when the visuals were pleasing. And from this and other studies, Norman explains the concept of affectivity. He says, we can observe that this is happening. We can observe that attractive things work better. How do we explain that? And he explains it with affectivity. And the concept of affectivity is that visuals can put you in a kind of mood. They put you in a mood that makes your reaction and perception of what you're looking at different. And he explains that there is both positive and negative affectivity. Let's start by looking at positive affectivity. According to Norman's theory of affectivity, pleasing stimuli, so pleasing visuals, create positive affectivity. And during positive affectivity, you are more likely to forgive errors and you're more creative. So if you have an ATM and you need people to be able to use it and enjoy using it and for them to have an easy time of using it, making good visuals is going to make them willing to forgive any errors. So if they press the wrong button, they're not going to panic. And they're going to be more creative, which can help them use the machine or the system better because they're more likely to notice good ways of doing things and to try different things to get the machine to work. In negative affectivity, utilitarian or unpleasing visuals can put you in a state of negative affectivity. So if the visuals are not pleasing, they're sort of unpleasant, you can be put in this mood or state of negative affectivity. And in negative affectivity, you're more focused and you're less forgiving of errors. So on the ATM that was not designed well and was kind of ugly and unattractive, if someone made a mistake, they got upset. Whereas on the ATM that had pleasing visuals, if they made a mistake, they were kind of forgiving and they just tried again. Negative affectivity is not necessarily bad. For example, if you've ever been in the art and journalism building, when the fire alarm goes off, you will know that it is probably the most horrendous sound that you will hear on campus. The screech is just mind-blowingly awful, and it puts you in a bad mood. This is actually a good thing. The point of the fire alarm is to freak you out and get you out of the building. If the fire alarm, instead of a screech, was a nice pleasant voice saying, "Fire, get out of the building," you would probably think, "Oh, I've got a minute to get my stuff, let me stop by my next, class and pick up any assignments I might miss during this, or let me grab my backpack out of my locker." There are lockers in AJ, I realize you don't all have lockers, but that's not good. You don't want that. So negative affectivity isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes you want negative affectivity. Sometimes you want people to just fill out the form and get it done. Sometimes you want people to just run out of the building. I mean, tax forms are kind of another example. You want people to take them seriously and be really focused when they fill them out. So you don't want tax forms that are like pretty and have butterflies on them. So negative affectivity is not necessarily bad. So how do we sort of think about effective design? If Norman is saying that affectivity exists, that pleasing visuals can put us in a positive state where we're willing to forgive errors and we're creative and feel good, and negative affectivity can put us in a state where we're super focused, vigilant, and don't feel all that great. What does this matter to us? How do we use this? Well, we use this by, when we're designing, using effective design. Effective design is the design of interfaces to elicit emotional experiences. So you're trying to get positive affectivity or you're trying to get negative affectivity. And sometimes you can do this to connect people to products. So you can probably think of a product that you have a lot of goodwill towards, a product that emotionally makes you feel good. That product can be giving you positive affectivity. Now, this whole concept of affectivity hinges on how the brain works. And this is described by Norman in Attractive Things Work Better, but I want to give you some examples and sort of a more in-depth explanation, because understanding the brain is really the key to a lot of things. When you understand how people see and interpret the things around them, it really helps you be a better designer. When you understand how people are receptive to messages, it helps you be a better salesperson. So we're going to talk a little bit about the brain in this section, and what I'm going to do is talk about the 3 levels of processing that Norman theorizes in Attractive Things Work Better. So Norman breaks the brain into 3 types of processing, and it comes from 3 sections. He says you can sort of break the brain into 3 sections. Each section does its own processing. So the visceral section is the part of the brain right by the brainstem. This is the part of the brain that almost every animal has. Chickens, lizards, it's the most basic part of your brain. It's the part of your brain that allows you to breathe, that keeps you breathing, keeps your heart pumping. It's the part of your brain that reacts to stimuli, but it doesn't do much more than that. It's the most basic part, and it's at the bottom and it connects to your brainstem. On top of that, you have a behavioral portion of the brain, and this is somewhat more advanced. It's the part of your brain that controls everyday behavior. On top of that, on the front of your brain, you have the reflective area that does reflective processing, and this is the most advanced. And so in advanced species of animals like humans and chimpanzees, there's a little bit more of this reflective part, more of the behavioral part. You know, everyone's got visceral. Dogs and cats have less of the reflective part. Cats have a lot less than dogs, and a lot less than people. And then some animals like lizards hardly have any of that reflective part at all. Now, because we are humans and we have a big reflective part of our brain, we do a lot of reflective processing to such an advanced degree that we're contemplative, that we learn, that we can make generalizations. This is where conscious thought happens. When you have that inner monologue with yourself consciously, this is where it's happening. In the behavioral part of your brain, behavioral processing takes place. This part is not conscious. It controls your everyday behavior. You may find yourself, for example, driving to work kind of on autopilot. If you've ever gotten to work in the morning and kind of thought, how did I get here? I'm so tired. I don't even remember driving. It's because the behavioral part of your brain helped you a lot and sort of went through the motions of steering the car and taking the turns and got you there, even though you weren't conscious of all of it. The visceral part, the most basic part that does visceral processing, just is automatic. It's pre-wired. It responds instinctually. And it helps, I think, to think about these as related to animals. In the visceral part of your brain, you can think about this as your lizard brain. If you've ever been around a lizard, you might think they're kind of dumb as a brick. They run away when you're near, they go to wherever it's warm. They don't do a lot of, it's not obvious that they're doing a lot of thinking. The behavioral part of your brain you can think of sort of as your dog brain. Dogs are very good at socializing, especially with each other. They have pack rules. They learn behaviors. Most people have seen a dog, when it meets a new dog, like lay on the ground and roll over. It's showing a submissive behavior, and it's communicating socially through that behavior. And then you can think of the reflective part of your brain as the human brain. An advanced reflective part of the brain allows you to be conscious, to be self-aware, and to think about how you think and what you do. Now, this works in sort of different ways. Sometimes you have what's called bottom-up processing. And in this type of processing, you have a visceral reaction that you respond to, and it goes sort of from the bottom of your brain up to the top. So a good example is if you've ever been walking home late at night and like a raccoon or something jumped out of the bushes and scared you. I've definitely had this experience. You have this initial visceral response. So you're minding your own business, it's really quiet, and then something changes. There's a loud noise, there's rustling of leaves, and your lizard brain has a reaction. That's really all it's capable of. It goes, oh no, and that message then gets sent to your behavioral brain. And your behavioral brain processes that message and tells you what to do. So when you get a fright, your behavior that you've been taught your whole life, that you've learned from everything you've ever done, is seek help, like get out of here, right? And then your reflective brain gets the message, your human brain, and it tries to assess the situation. So you go from, oh no, the startle, to the response, the behavioral response, get help, to the actual reflective thinking, the conscious thought. Oh, let's just figure out what it is. It's a rustle in the bushes. It's just a cat. Okay, nothing's wrong. So you can have bottom-up processing. You also can have top-down processing. Processing where the thought starts, the action starts in the reflective brain. You have a thought. Like, you think to yourself, do I believe in ghosts? Let me think about it. And I've definitely had this experience, maybe you have too, where I've been on the internet and I've seen a YouTube video, it's a scary ghost clip from a movie, or someone has caught a ghost on camera or something, and you might be watching it and you might think to yourself, do I really believe in ghosts? Let me think about it. Let me think on that topic. And then that message goes to your behavioral brain, and you start to sort of have a reaction. And I've definitely had this experience where I'm like, I saw this thing and I'm like, I don't think I believe in ghosts. Do I? And then I start to get like a little freaked out. I'm like, did I lock my doors? Because my behavioral reaction to this scary thought is to do some kind of behavior to go through this process, some kind of process that I'm used to going through. And then that message then gets sent to visceral, and then I start to get a little freaked out, right? And then I'm kind of like jumpy, I feel uneasy, I feel a little bit scared, all because I thought to myself, do I believe in ghosts? I wonder if ghosts are real. And you may have had a similar experience where you've started thinking about something and it's affected your mood and it's made you scared, or it's made you jumpy, or it's made you sad. So there's two levels or two directions of processing. Sometimes we react and then behave and then think on that. Sometimes we think and then that forms some kind of reaction. Now, this is important because in visual design, when someone goes to a website, they're only going to spend 6 to 8 seconds looking at it. So a lot of what they see is going to be a visceral reaction. In 6 seconds, you're not really taking the time to think and do top-down processing. You're sort of reacting to what you see. So as designers, we want to create designs that have a visceral reaction so we can get positive affectivity. So we want to create designs that when people first see it, instead of thinking, oh no, they think, aw, or yeah, that's me, they feel connected to it, or it makes them happy, or it makes them excited. We want to give that visceral reaction with what they see so that it will turn into a reflective action. So here I have the example, oh no, get help, oh it's just a cat. But if this is a brand, you can sort of think of it as, oh, this makes me happy. Now I'm smiling. I now associate this brand with happiness. So then the reflection would be like, oh, this site's making me really happy. I like this brand. This brand makes me feel good. And just as another way to sort of think about these types of processing, just so you can remember them, again, I really suggest thinking about them sort of as a lizard brain, a dog brain, and a human brain. I really wanted to show you, I actually have a lizard. I have a 6-foot iguana that lives in my house with me, and so I have a lot of experience with the lizard brain, and I really wanted to show him to you guys in this video, but he's been sick for the last couple weeks and he's very uncooperative, so I will show you some YouTube videos. But to get a sense of what the visceral brain does, think of a lizard. Lizards don't recognize their names. They have no way of getting your attention. They can't call you over. If you've ever had a dog, you know that a dog can come get you. If a dog wants to go outside, it'll let you know. Lizards don't do that. They don't have any type of conversation. They don't learn very well. I can attest to that. They basically just respond to stimuli. So I have a couple YouTube videos I wanted to show you. Here's a video in which a lizard is on a computer screen and you can see it's responding to the cursor. So lizards look for food. They eat a lot of insects, so they're constantly looking for little things that move fast. And this lizard has found something that's little that moves fast, and so it thinks it's something to eat. And it's just using this very visceral part of its brain. It sees something moving, it wants to eat it. It doesn't really think about it. A lizard doesn't go, is that food? I wonder. Let me assess it more before I put it in my mouth. No. A lizard has mostly visceral brain, so a lizard just does what its instincts tell it to do. And here's another example. Lizard eating a sock. My iguana will do the same thing. If I leave any fabric or clothes out on the floor that are the color of vegetables, he will try to eat them. So this is a bearded lizard, the bearded dragon. They eat leafy greens. They eat crickets and stuff too, but they enjoy leafy greens. And so this lizard has found a sock that is green. It sees the green and it tries to eat it. So it's trying to eat this sock. So the lizard comes across as, to us, seems kind of stupid, right? But it's just, its visceral brain is reacting to stimuli. So it sees green, it thinks food. And it doesn't have the ability to process it up to the reflective level. In fact, this whole video is this lizard still trying to eat the sock. Like, it will not give up on this sock. My lizard is the same way. It takes him like 12 to 15 chews before he realizes whatever's in his mouth is not edible. So this lizard's just not going to give up. It sees green. Green means food. Visceral brain wants food, puts it in its mouth. Also, that lizard is really cute. On top of that, we have the behavioral brain, or the dog brain. You probably all have hung out with a dog before. You know that they learn by positive behavioral enforcement. If you're really nice to them, every time they bring you something, they'll keep bringing you things, and they're social. At the reflective level, you can think about that as the human brain. What can humans do that other animals seemingly can, or that, we're not quite sure they can yet? Have conversations with yourself, learn very easily, group things together, and be self-aware. Now, there's some evidence that some animals are self-aware, so calling this the human brain maybe isn't fair. Same with dog brain. Dogs aren't the only animals that have a highly behavioral brain, and of course, all animals have some kind of visceral brain, so it's not just lizards who are acting on the visceral level, but it does help to kind of remember which is which. Visceral, lizard; behavioral, dog; reflective, human. So let's look at some of these concepts in action. So we're talking about affectivity, how visuals create a visceral reaction. When you look at this logo for a movie, a title design, you probably have a visceral reaction. And how do we get that? So now I want to move into, you get the concept of affectivity. How do we create visuals that give a visceral reaction and put someone in an affective state? Well, what about this is giving us the heebie-jeebies? Let's look at it. It's blurry and out of focus, which is not normal. There's blood splatter. That's scary. And this design has a high chroma, which means the red is very saturated. It's actually really hard on the eyes. It's sort of a shocking color. It's so red that it's almost unpleasant how red it is. And so we create this design that scares us by using elements of the design that are putting us in a weird mood. Viscerally, we have a reaction. We see blood splatter. At the visceral level, that scares us. We see this super high chroma that we're not used to seeing. It's unusual. It freaks us out a little. It's blurry and out of focus. That's weird. So let's look at some more examples. Technophage. What about this is giving you a visceral reaction of sort of seeing this as a scary thing? Well, it's very pointy, and we associate pointy things with dangerous things. It has these jagged edges, which we associate with sort of messiness, or cutting our hand on something, or a paper cut. The letters at the top are incomplete, so we get the sense of something is missing or something is wrong. The letters are uneven, which is not usual. It's weird. And the letters are sort of being pulled down in an awkward way. So the visuals of this design clue us in to what this is about, that this is sort of a scary story. And we have a visceral reaction based on something as simple as pointy letters. Let's look at some logos. This is a logo. Reign of Faith is a ministry, and they had a designer create some logos, and this is one of the logos the designer made, and Reign of Faith said no thank you to this logo because it gives kind of a negative connotation, right? It doesn't look like the kind of church you would probably want to go to. Why not? Well, the expression on the horse's face is mean. The way the eye is drawn with the heavier part in the front makes it look like it's like squinting and giving us the evil eye. Its mouth is doing a frown. It has these pointy ears that are facing forward, more like devil horns instead of horse ears. The mane is really pointy and dangerous. Instead of looking like soft horsehair, they look like spikes. The horse is angled like it's charging forward, and it has this really thick neck like it's a wrestler or something. The yellow is the color of like fire and brimstone, which you may not associate it with fire and brimstone, except there's this sort of like devilish horse. So then you think of those colors as being of the devil. And then we have this cheekbone on the horse that's really sharp, and this horse just looks mean and nasty. And it's all these little elements, pointy edges, mean expression, frowny face, forward-facing horns, fire and brimstone color that make us have that visceral reaction of being kind of maybe upset by this or put off by it. They went through a redesign, and this is what they created instead. Much better. What's better about this? Well, viscerally, it's more comforting. How so? What parts of this image have a comforting connotation? I've labeled them. There's sort of this gentle expression. There's no eye, so we are free to sort of think about it as having whatever feeling we want it to have. The face is angled down as if you were reaching out to pet it. The little ear is dainty and not a little Satan horn like in the last one. The hair looks like it's from a romance novel cover. It's really soft and wispy. It has reins on it with these yellow lines like the horse is being controlled. We have white, which is associated with purity, instead of yellow for the words now. And the horse is angled as if it's running on a beach instead of like running through the pit of hell like the first one. It's kind of got a breeze going through it. You get the sense that air is blowing across this horse's face and throwing its hair back and then throwing the reins back. So it's breezy, comforting, calm. There's not pointy edges. There's not mean expressions. And so the connotation of these visuals is much more comforting, which is more in line with what you would expect a ministry to express in their logo. I have just a few more examples. Dairy Today. A few years ago, Dairy Today had a redesign. This is their old style of design on the left, and this is their new style of design on the right. Obviously much different. What is the connotation of the one on the left, and what is the connotation of the one on the right? On the left, the connotation is probably kind of negative. You probably have a visceral reaction to this that's not good. And that makes you think reflectively that Dairy Today is not good. On the right, you probably have kind of an aw reaction, right? And so you have this visceral aw reaction that translates on the reflective level to having a positive view of Dairy Today. So on the right, Dairy Today kind of maybe looks like something you would even pick up and leaf through. Let's look at the visual connotations that make these up. On the left, Dairy Today is written in this boring Times bleh font. It's old and stuffy and boring. The sky is sad. Even the sky is sad. The sky's not even blue. Like, what world does Dairy Today live in where the sky's not even blue? And then these cows are disgusting. They have mud all over them. The one in the background is literally rolling in mud. They have mean expressions. And after a minute, you start to wonder, are they standing in their own poop? Like, what is this? How is there no grass in this field? What is happening? It's just the colors, the textures, the type, the shapes, what's happening in the picture, the quality of the picture. It looks like a picture some idiot just went out and took. Doesn't look like anyone tried. Is all negative connotations. On the right, we have a modern font. It's big and bold. We have this pretty Easter color in the background. It's a very gentle color. The cow is clean as can be. The cow is giving this cute, gentle expression. It's super cute. And this design is very sterile and clean. There's not a lot on the design. The cow is clearly clean. It's in a room that's sterile and clean. And so you would not want to drink the milk from the farm on the left. You would probably be okay with drinking it from the farm on the right. How do you send those different messages? Through the visuals. Two more examples. Let's move on to blogs because you're going to be creating a blog. We Are IU is a great example. I'm really hoping no one from IU sees that I'm saying this is a great example in a Ball State video, but this is a great example. Look at the typefaces. There's handwritten typeface on this blog. This is a blog for potential IU students, people who are considering IU, who want to know more about the IU community before they commit. So the typeface, the handwriting is very, very friendly. It makes this blog seem super personable, like a real person put this together, like you're writing notes to a friend on this site. The We Are IU is really big and bold, which shows that it's proud. The picture in the slider is a funny picture from a funny movie, so it shows that this blog has a sense of humor. We have these ribbons with a slab serif typeface in all caps. Very trendy right now, very, very trendy. So it shows that IU is friendly, personable, proud, funny, you know, has a sense of humor, and is trendy and gets you. So the message here is, we're here to be your friend, we get you, come join us. And the visuals indicate that. One more example, this is a screenshot of the blog for Borshoff. Borshoff is a PR firm in Indianapolis. Myra Borshoff-Cook, who is the principal at Borshoff, graduated from Ball State. So if you ever get the chance to apply to an internship there or take a tour there, you should. But let's look at the blog. What are the visuals? Well, we see this logo that's two speech bubbles touching each other in blue and green. And then we have Borshoff with these sort of leafy type flourishes. So this logo tells us that Borshoff is connective and friendly because we have two chat bubbles that are communicating with each other, and kind of eccentric because their font is more eccentric. It's not a standard font just from that they downloaded from the internet or something. It's probably specially made for them. We have the navigation bar on the left is really simple, lots of space, really simple typography, very modern, very sleek. The blocky design sort of is businessy. If this were like waves or circles, it might feel more fun and kid-like, but it's blocky, which is more business-like. Again, you have the connective and friendly bubbles on the right, and then the typefaces are very elegant, and there's lots of space. And so the visual connotation here is that Borshoff is modern, sleek, eccentric, but business-oriented. That's everything I want to cover in this video. In the next video, I'm going to sort of continue this discussion and talk about words as well and show some examples of how creating a list of words to be used on your site can increase the connotation understanding and help the visuals send a message.